You're listening to the Good News Podcast with Jamie Holtum, brought to you by NBUC.
Hey guys, this is Jamie Holtum here on the Good News Podcast. We are entering into episode number 7 and so glad that you can join us. Once again, we have a very special guest. Joining us today is Rebecca Kabiseba, and Rebecca has been part of our team, our production team, leading our social media. And as we talk today about reimagining me, our part in the sharing of the gospel, I just knew that Rebecca would be a good guest because she's living into her purpose these days in very new ways. Can't wait for you to hear all about it. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Good News Podcast. So excited to have another episode. This is episode number 7. And we were just saying, can't believe this is our 7th episode. And we're just as excited as when we started.
Yes.
And you're going to be in for a treat today. So glad to have Rebecca Kabiseba with us today.
You got it.
And that, to be honest, that's the first time I've pronounced her name publicly. And we were practicing beforehand. So thanks, Rebecca, for your grace and patience and just love the role you're playing in our church these days. You've probably seen Rebecca on a Sunday morning. She's hosting regularly, but also working behind the scenes in video and in social media. And just would love to hear, Rebecca, a little bit about you and how you got here to NBUC. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm Rebecca. And how I got here, my boyfriend at the time, who is now my fiance. Wow.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's very cool. Yeah.
He sent me the link because I got out of school and I was really looking for something in my field. I was working at a job that I really didn't like at all, and I was miserable. And so I decided to leave that job, and I was looking for work. And so he sent me this link. Hey, why not, work at a church? They're looking for a video editor. You know how to edit videos. And I'm like, oh, yeah, sure. So I applied thinking that, they're not going to respond. And then Dwayne responded, and I actually had an interview with him. But then I found out that it's in Brampton, where I live in East Scarborough.
Ooh, okay. Yeah.
So I'm like, you know what? I'm not sure if I'll be able to do this because it would be the commuting every day would be too much. And I kind of just left it at that. And then he responded and he's like, you don't actually have to come in every day. You can just come in Monday and Wednesdays. And I was like, wow, that's perfect. And so we did that, and then we got the interview, and this is how I ended up here.
Oh, well, from my perspective, it's been such a blessing to have you. The faithfulness that you bring, the quality of what you're doing, the leadership that you're offering. But how has it been for you? So it's been how many months now?
About 3.
3 months. Okay, so good time to get your feet wet a little bit and feel things out. So what's the experience been like for you as you enter in? And again, we're in this series called Reimagine, and as we said, in today's message, really been diving into drilling down into who we are as a church. And so love to hear from you what it's been like to enter in. But what's your observation of NBUC and the unique church that it might be?
Yeah. So I grew up Catholic, and then after going to Catholic church, I went to Pentecostal church and then to a Baptist church. So I've never been to a United church before. And so I didn't really know what I was getting myself into in terms of faith, but I knew that they believed in Jesus. And so I came in not really knowing what to expect. And I remember meeting you and just to see kind of how you carry yourself. And I recognized the Holy Spirit.
Is this where I should apologize?
Maybe. No. You were so polite and just loving, but not just a worldly polite, but there was something more about it. And I kind of recognized, the Jesus in you a little bit. And I remember just being like, wow, these people really love God and really love what they're doing. So in terms of faith, that was really, really amazing to see.
Yeah.
And then in terms of work, I was still trying to figure out my place and where I fit in with the team, what my role looked like. But the team is such a good people. They're such good people. And they made me feel really comfortable and at ease. And I was just really focused on, I want to do really well on my job. I really want to do good. I want to impress people. I want to impress them. And then I remember the second week where I came here, on my way here, God just kind of spoke to me in the car. And he reminded me, you're not doing this to impress anyone. You're not doing this to impress your team. You're not doing this to impress your supervisor or your leaders, you're doing this for me. You're coming into this place and you're helping my message get out there. That's what you need to focus on, looking to impress me, and work for me. And that completely changed my mindset. It even changed the way that I kind of like carry myself when I'm coming here. Because when I go into places, I get a little anxious, so I have to mentally prepare myself. But God just really spoke to me like that you're doing it for me.
Very cool. You've mentioned a few times to me about the car ride here.
Yes.
And God speaking to you and being a time of connection with God, of time with God. Can you tell us a bit more about how you utilize that time on your drive here and how it prepares you for what you need to do or what God needs you to do that day?
Yeah, it really does. I saw it initially when I was speaking with Dwayne. I saw like the commute here as like such a burden, right? Because you're going through the downtown traffic, it's long. And so it's funny how God uses that as a moment to kind of communicate with me. So every morning I'd put on my playlist, my worship playlist, and through that, the Holy Spirit just reveals things to me. And sometimes it's different things. Sometimes it's kind of just like, hey, compliment this person today, or say hi to this person today. And it's something that I wouldn't really think about, but God knows why they needed to hear that. And so he communicates that in the morning on my way here, or he mentally prepares me, calms me down if I'm anxious. And I recently read in 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7, I think it says, cast all your anxieties to me because I care for you. And I read that last night.
Wow.
And so coming in today, I was really anxious. I don't know why. And so I just reminded myself of that. The Holy Spirit reminded myself of that verse. And that really prepared me for this day. So,
love it. I mean, we'll get into the topic of the day as far as the Reimagining Me, which was the message that we're doing the podcast kind of out of here today. But that one of the pieces was a relationship with God, a relationship with Jesus, and it's a good time for us all to look at how can we grow in that. You obviously are growing in your faith, and that isn't that beautiful? When you spend time with God, God gives you a scripture that just sets you up for a different day than you would have had otherwise. You came with this kind of depth of faith, and often we're all growing in that, right? That's why
absolutely.
It's exciting to be in a relationship with Jesus where things do evolve and shift and change and we grow. But one of the things that I caught when you had applied for the job was you had done a YouTube video on how to have a relationship with Jesus. And I'm pretty sure you didn't do that just because you were applying for a job at a church, right? But having that in your portfolio, if you will, on your YouTube channel, like that actually set you up pretty good for that interview. I have to tell you.
It did. Okay, good.
Yeah. But so friends, like go check out Rebecca's YouTube channel. You're gonna want to see this video. I think it's amazing. But what's the summary, if you could, of that video? And why did you do it? Like that? That's why did you do that video? Not everybody has a YouTube video on their channel about how to have a relationship with Jesus. I love that you do.
Oh, thanks. So I overshare so much, and I think it's like an inclination that God puts in me to just share. I'm really open about a lot of things that I go through, and so I was having a lot of trouble just kind of like growing my relationship with God. And then he revealed it to me through Exodus when it talks about, the Egyptians and like how Moses kind of like took them out of, the Israelites, when Moses took them out of Egypt. And then went into the desert, and they were complaining because they're like, we don't have any food. We had more food in Egypt while we were slaves. Honestly. And so they talked to Moses, and then Moses talks to God, and God is like, okay, I'm going to provide food from the sky for you. And you're to eat it every single day, but don't store it. So just eat what you have today. So go out, grab your food, finish that food, go back home. And so some of the Israelites, what they would do is they would store up some of this food and then keep it for the next day. And then they would wake up the next day and the food, the Bible says that it turned into worms. And so I was reading that, and then the Holy Spirit kind of revealed to me that it's kind of the same thing with our relationship with God. Like we spiritually park ourselves. So you'll have a really good moment with Christ. You'll be like, oh my gosh, I feel so on fire for God. And you might seen like a sermon that you really liked, or felt just really connected to God. And then the next day you're kind of like, you know what, I had a good day with God yesterday. So you're kind of, you know, relying back on your food that you got yesterday, whereas what you got yesterday might not be what you need today. And so it really spoke to me in the sense that I spiritually park myself. So it's like I'll read my Bible on Monday, and then on Tuesday I'll be like, you know, I did that yesterday, so I still feel close to God until maybe Thursday, where I feel spiritually quenched, and then I go back to my Bible. But God calls us to have a relationship with Him every day, every second. So I need to stop relying on yesterday's food and go grab today's food, because that's what it's meant for, right? God is here today too. He's not just here yesterday.
Yeah, daily bread, eh?
Exactly.
Daily bread. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what the video was about.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, hopefully people can check it out. It's very encouraging and inspiring, and
Thanks.
yeah, that's awesome. So around the message time today, Reimagine Me. Got a couple things I want to chat about, purpose and giving and those kinds of things as well. But anything in particular that struck you that you wanted to name out of that today?
I think just the title kind of spoke to me. That's like the title of Reimagining Me. This has been a time where, you know, a lot of people that already struggle with mental health, they're struggling a lot because, you know, especially here in Canada, the weather and also the isolation. So what spoke to me was really the title Reimagining Me and what that looks like right now. Right now, personally, I'm going through a season of feeling low, and with like a past of dealing with depression and anxiety. And so that title, Reimagine Me, it really spoke to me like, okay, maybe God is working through me right now so that I can come out a new me, right?
Yeah.
And it inspires me to kind of reimagine myself and take away those expectations that I had for me. So it's the title that really spoke to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you just never know how God's going to work in somebody's life, and who knows who else is listening to this today who also struggle with depression, mental wellness, COVID, pandemic, darkness. It's so dark right now. For so long in the day, in these things, and as you're talking, it reminded me of in Romans chapter 8, Apostle Paul offers this beautiful image of birthing something new, and kind of refers to the birth pangs, like the pains of birth. And sometimes we go through a season of challenge, stress, pain, but God's going to birth something out of that. And that Reimagine Me is part of what God can do. God's rebirthing everything right now. The church, our world, but also each one of us. And that's cool to catch that.
That's so true.
Yeah.
That's so true. I read in another place, I think it was 2 Corinthians, and it was saying how, you know, outwardly you may feel like you're withering away, but inwardly God is doing a work in you daily. And that has been like my stronghold lately, because outwardly I don't feel like my best. I feel like I'm coming short, but inwardly I have to trust that God is doing something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Love it. And just as we mentioned mental wellness, so for people to know, we have coming up Sundays, we have spiritual transformation and baptism coming up, stories of spiritual transformation on November the 8th, but then November 15th and 22nd, we'll do a 2-part series on mental wellness.
Good.
Because as you say, Rebecca, it's always a challenge. It's always so prevalent in our society, our culture these days, but now perhaps even more so than ever with COVID, and especially with the numbers going back up and things not opening up like we had hoped that they would. So I'm glad God has led us to do that.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
So when it comes to purpose and finding God's purpose for your life, I mean, we're never done working that out. I think that it doesn't matter what our age is. But especially as a young person who's just finished school, journalism degree, right? Exactly. How does that resonate with where you're at these days, and what does it look like for you, maybe even right now, in this role that you're in, to be discovering God's purposes for you?
Yeah, God not too long ago kind of revealed that to me as I was graduating. Since high school, I've always lived with other people. So after graduating high school for college, I had to live with my neighbors because my mom had to move and my family had to move. So I had to stay with my neighbors, which was really hard, like away with my, like from my family. And then while I was in college, after finishing college for my internship, I had to live with like a family friend. And then after that, I had to rent somewhere else. And so I just found myself always being at other people's homes or like renting from like a stranger. And I would tell God, like, Lord, I feel so out of place. I feel like I don't have a place that I can call my own. You know, I feel like I don't have a home, basically, and I feel drained. And he revealed to me that I'm calling you to be a planter. And for you to be able to plant, you have to be in different environments to plant the seed. And so when he revealed that to me, I was like, you know, that makes a lot of sense because since like growing up, I've always changed schools. I've changed schools 8 times growing up, environments. I would never be in the same place for a long time. And I always felt like, why does this always happen to me? Until he revealed that to me. And then a couple days later, I got a call from the lady that I lived with in college, my neighbor. She wasn't a believer, but I got a call from her, and she tells me that she got baptized. And I was just so thrilled because when I lived with her, I would kind of post like little sticky notes in my room of like Bible verses that spoke to me. And she would come in and kind of read them and be like, oh, what does this mean? And I would get to talk to her about the gospel. But she was never like, oh, I don't, you know, it's fine. I don't really believe it. And I'm like, it's okay. That's okay. I'm not going to force it on you. Yeah. And to get that call from her a couple days later that I got that revelation was just amazing because I was like, wow, you know, God really was planting in her life. And I also, after that, I also got, you know, a message from my old landlord asking if I can pray with her. And she was never like interested in Christ or anything like that. Wow. So God just revealing his purpose really made a difference in how I see things now. Where when God brings me into a new environment, like here, I'm like, you know what? I know what you're doing. And now I understand, you know, and now I can go into it with a different perspective, knowing that I'm not here in vain. And that if I'm here, then God is doing a work through other people too. And so that's kind of how I feel like my purpose here is to just show God's love and show, you know, what he's done in my life. Yeah. And that's all I can speak on, right? What he's done for me. Yeah. Yeah. And so it's cool to now know, kind of have that perspective now, and not just go into it blindly, knowing that, you know, God is doing a work in me. And a verse that helped me was Paul, when he wrote like, Apollo waters, I plant the seed, but it's only God that can make it grow. And like that has been really helpful, knowing that it's not me, I'm not doing anything. Yeah. I'm just going where he leads me, and he's going to make whatever it is grow in the process. That's awesome. Yeah. And just the affirmation of those experiences as God speaks into your life, that for you to be then taking your journalism degree and using it in a church where you can plant seeds, where you can share your faith, share Christ as part of what you do every day, using those gifts and experience. That's, it's wild. Yeah. It's crazy. When he revealed that to me, I was like, that makes a lot of sense because I like talking a little too much. So I like making videos, and those videos reach people that I couldn't reach. Yeah. I made a video once, how to know when God is speaking to you. And that reached people in like different places, different countries. And that really encouraged me because I was like, wow, you know, God, you're doing something with me. But yeah, it's super encouraging. And so what were some of the highlights of that video? I'm going to bite. I can't not bite on that. Yeah. Because I think that is a question that people have. You know, if we kind of go back to the topic, like Reimagine Me, if people are really open to that, they're trying to find what God's desire is for their life, for our life. Yeah. And how do you hear from God? How does God speak to people? I mean, you've given lots of examples just in this podcast on how it's happened for you, but how did you communicate that? What did you say? That's cool. Yeah. Thank you. It was a interesting, like kind of like mind-blowing revelation. For me, it was actually really simple if you think about it, but I'm going to explain it. So how do you know that God is speaking to you? So I gave the example in the video that, let's say I'm at the mall with a friend. I'm going to use you as an example. Let's say you're at the mall with Katrina, and then you hear someone calling your name, and it's Leah. Leah's calling your name. You'll recognize her voice without even you looking at her, because you know the voice, you recognize the voice, you've spent time with the voice. So it's easy for you to distinguish from any other voice that, wait, that is my daughter Leah calling me. But if it's a stranger calling your name, you might not be so inclined to turn back and look. But because you recognize Leah's voice, you'll be, oh, that's Leah calling me, and you'll turn around. It's kind of the same thing with God. When you take the time to kind of spend time with him, when you take the time to read what he's saying in his word, you'll start to recognize his characteristics and the way that he sounds, so that whenever you go into a situation and you hear a lot of other voices, a lot of other people's opinions, and you hear God's voice, you'll recognize his voice because you've spent time with him and you know him. So it's all about knowing, and it's all about connection.
Wow.
That's how you hear God's voice.
Yeah.
Taking time to have that connection.
Yeah, that relationship with God,
Yes.
And just like any other relationship, over time, that develops that you recognize that voice.
Yeah.
Jesus said, "The sheep will recognize my voice as their shepherd." That's so awesome.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So that I shared that, and it's crazy to see the impact that it's done. Yeah.
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 Cool.
Thanks.
One of the pieces that we're talking about today, because we were looking at the Reimagine series coming to an end, and looking at a campaign around just resourcing the vision that God has given us. We got into the topic of giving, and this is another area where people can grow in our giving. What's that been like for you as far as you live into your life as a follower of Jesus? Where has giving fit into that? And what would be your messaging for others around that opportunity, if you will, as well, to grow into that?
Yeah. Giving, like at first when, because in the Catholic Church, the basket passes around and you have to kind of put it in. There's so much importance around that. So that's one discipline that I'm really glad that I picked up. But especially as a young person right now, having to like pay for rent or pay for other things and pay for a car, it can get difficult to want to give because you see all this list of things that you have to pay for. And you're like, I just don't think I have the space within my monthly budget to give. But there's a certain kind of peace when you get yourself to give. And you just think that like everything that I have right now is not by my own means. Like recognizing, I think, is the first thing. Recognizing that what you have is not from you. God has made it possible. I was looking for a place for 9 months. I had to live living with other people. I had to live with Nick's family for about 9 months just to be able to find a place in Toronto. It was so hard. And so when I finally found an apartment, the first thing that came to mind is like, I have to give an offering for this because I recognize that this is not by my doing. God made this possible for me. So I think acknowledging that, what you have is from God and you giving is a response to that. I think that perspective changes how you feel when you're giving. And so now it's kind of like God has done way too much in my life for me not to give. I think that's my perspective. And I look back on my childhood, my family, right now, God has done way too much for me not to give. And that's how I look at it.
That's awesome. I love the smile on your face.
Oh, thanks.
As you share that. I that smile on your face reminds me of an experience I had where I'd gone to see an older couple who, very faithful couple, all their life they'd been followers of Jesus, and I think they had grown in all aspects of their Christian life, including giving over the years. So they'd got to a point where it was just amazing. They would give $10,000 a year.
Oh, wow.
This is on top of their tithe. This is on top of their regular giving. This was extra to some project that they just believed God wanted to bless.
Wow.
And so they supported the Journey Neighborhood Center, and so they'd given a check for that. So So I went to see them just to say thanks,
Yeah.
and we just got in this great conversation on why they give and how they'd grown in that over the years.
Yeah.
And it was so amazing because when I asked him about it, like why they give, he was older, so it was a physical exertion for him to do this, but he actually got
Mm.
up on the edge of his seat, right?
Mm.
And he looked at me and his eyes got big and he had this
Mm.
huge smile and I'll never forget, he said, "We just love to give."
Oh.
But that heart that God had given them
Yeah.
to the desire to give, and
Wow.
I just think there's so many different ways that people grow in their giving, and that's part of
Yeah.
our prayer as we move into this Reimagine campaign time. That this would be with great joy, with smiles on our faces, that we give to a
Yeah.
cause that we really believe and are excited about. More
Yeah.
people getting to know Jesus and having this life transformation, being part of a transformed world. Imagine
Yeah.
God building better lives, better families, a
Yeah.
better Brampton and beyond.
We
We do
do.
exactly. Like that's what we're giving to. That's what we're giving of our life to.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
but I think for Katrina and I, as we have grown in giving over the years, just as you're expressing, there's just that recognition of God has given us all that we
Mm.
we have, and you kind of start there. That's why we talk about that as our first biblical principle, around
Yeah.
giving, and it's so true. One thing I was thinking about around the message, I'd love to get your thoughts on this,
Mhm.
is that when God places within us a desire to give,
Mm.
God will also bring the means. Because that's been our
Yes.
experience, without getting into all the details over the years, that often we've had this desire to give and even to grow in our giving
Mm.
and just really want to. And
Yeah.
there's been times where we've wanted to, but not sure how. And then all of a
Exactly.
sudden, God brings the how. Like we'll give the means that kind of honors that desire that God has put in
Yeah.
us. Yeah, what do
It's
you think
great.
about
I
that?
think it just shows how like clever God is
Eh?
sometimes.
Yeah.
It's wild. I was reading Deuteronomy, and it was speaking upon how God gave the Israelites the command to give their tithe and their
Hmm.
livestock, right? And that livestock, that commandment was obeying God, but also God was using that livestock to feed the Levites
Hmm.
who didn't have any inheritance. So it's cool how like by us giving, God is supplying it for someone else's needs.
Hmm.
But also, you know, when God equips, he provides. That's always what I've told myself,
Hmm.
and it's cool how he knows our needs. Like he
Yeah.
really does
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
He really does know our need. He
Hmm.
knows that this money that you put aside for like, I don't know, maybe you wanted to buy new
Hmm.
shoes. He knows that you need shoes.
Hmm. Hmm.
So he's going to provide a way by
Yeah.
someone else or, because all good things come from him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he knows. And
Yeah.
I think that helps to know that God knows my needs.
Hmm.
He
Hmm.
knows I have to pay rent.
Hmm.
He gave me this apartment and he's going to provide for it.
Hmm.
Right.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I think that's awesome.
Cool. One of the things you're doing around in the church these days, Rebecca, is social media. And
Mm,
as we're talking about reimagining the church, and that's an area that we're trying to really be intentional about.
yeah.
Talk a little about what you're doing around social media these days.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I'm basically at first my perspective was I'm getting the message out
Okay.
there.
Mhm.
I'm just communicating what the church is doing. And then I saw this post. This guy said social media isn't a way to distribute the message. It's a way to also minister. And I
Mm.
was like, "Oh wow, I
Mhm.
never saw it like that." I thought it was always like a mean to connect
Mhm.
or to share things. But it's also a ministry in itself.
Absolutely.
And I
Cool.
was like, wow, okay, that's really cool. And so I really want to break the boundaries of Instagram is for young people or Facebook is for the older generation. I want everyone to be on everything and be able to connect. So that's, I guess, the mindset that I go in
Yeah.
with. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
ministry in itself.
Absolutely. And talk about purpose, eh? So that changes your purpose around it too, I suspect. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Because I have to now view it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
So it's cool because I never saw it social media as a ministry because there's
Mm.
so many like negative connotations around
Mhm.
social media is distracting, it's this,
Mhm.
it's that, but if God can use anything, he can use
Exactly.
social media as well. Why
Yeah.
couldn't he do that? Why isn't he sovereign like that? If he's
Yeah.
sovereign over everything, he's
Yeah.
sovereign over social media.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's kind of how I've been trying to see it, that it's a ministry and not just a way to communicate the ministry.
Yeah, absolutely. And so 100% agree. And I think over the COVID pandemic time, we've experienced that more than ever, just realizing that online is a way that people are connecting and we can share good news. It's giving us the opportunity to give more people access to this good news that we have in Jesus. And that's part of what you're leading for us and doing. And just so thank you, whether it's posting unsung hero stories or using your journalism gifts. I love the way that you're writing these things up.
Thanks.
How can we all participate in that? Because I think, hey, Reimagine Me, so social media isn't just for the person who happens to be leading from the church's perspective. It's an opportunity for all of us to participate in what God's doing. How can we help with the social media piece that you're leading?
Yeah, like you said, participate. I think that's the biggest way you can help is, participating and sharing your ideas, because I'm not the end all be all. I know that there's other people that have other great ideas, and I want to implement that. I don't want it to just be like an isolated thing that I'm doing on my own, but I want other people's inputs and what they want to, because it's for the congregation, right? And I'm not just the congregation. There's so much more. And so I want that communication. I think that would be great to have participation and just people, even encouragement. I recently had a message. I can't remember what her name is. I think it's Allison. And she just sent a message to the NBUC page, like, thank you so much for what you're doing. It's great and it's reaching people and it's saying something. It's like, that's really encouraging. And so just to participate, because it's not just a me thing, it's all of us, right?
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely. Yeah. Hey, so what's the most exciting thing that you've been a part of posting as far as your social media work so far, or one of them, because there may be a few. And
it has to be this recent week, Inclusivity Week, where every day we would post or highlight a group or an individual, and just being able to see the reaction from some of these posts and how included people felt was amazing. Especially Brian's story really spoke to me, and to kind of see the reaction from people. People were so surprised that he was so open and honest, and I think that encourages other people to be open and honest too. Because I feel like God works the best when you're transparent. And he's able to speak to other people when you're transparent. So to get to see that reaction that post itself had was just amazing. Yeah. And so,
it was a great week, that the week, that on radical inclusivity, and every day there was a story. And I know we had much greater connections with people and engagement that week, like significantly.
Oh it went up that week. When I looked at the analytics, that week was a lot of our interactions went up by so many percentage. So it was really cool to see that too.
Well, I just want to say thanks again, Rebecca, for your role in that, in making social media a ministry, social ministry. You really, you're really doing a great job and taking us to another level, and just is really grateful for that content calendar that you have for us to be following and living by, the intentionality, the leadership that you're offering behind it. So
thank you.
And the faith, the way that, as you said, this is part of your purpose in life, to share Jesus, and the way you're doing that through this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. I'm really looking forward to more that we can do. And even coming to Christmas soon, I'm excited for how that's going to translate, or how we're going to be able to reach people. So that's exciting.
For sure. Okay, so last word. We got to close, but we can't take that teaser and not say something. So what are you excited about around Christmas, as we're looking at Christmas in December, around online social media? What's going to be happening?
I'm looking forward for just the fun things that we're going to do, because in isolation, it's so hard to have fun sometimes, because you're looking at it from a screen. But the content is what I'm excited for. Just the ideas that we have for content-wise for Christmas is going to be fire. So I'm excited to get to do it, and to see the people's reaction and the congregation's reaction, to just feel kind of included. People are going to be staying home, and it might be hard to feel that Christmas spirit. But the content that we're doing, I'm excited to see how that resonates with the congregation.
Absolutely. Cool.
Yeah.
Me too. Can't wait. And we're actually be looking at doing some live events over December too.
Yes.
Live online, that is, not in person, of course. But so that's exciting as well.
Yeah.
Wow. Hey, thanks, Rebecca, for being a guest today on the Good News podcast. Everyone, thanks so much for joining us. If you could share this with others, if you want to subscribe so you're one of our followers and just to help us get the word out, there's good news to share. And we hope the Good News podcast is one of the many ways that we can do that. Thanks again, Rebecca.
Thank you,
so deeply appreciate who you are and the way God is both working in and through your life. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Good News podcast with Jamie Holtum. If you liked what you heard today, please share it with a friend who may benefit from today's conversation. And if you want to hear more, be sure to subscribe to this show and turn on your notifications so you never miss an episode. Thanks again. We hope you enjoyed today's discussion, and we'll see you next time.